So thank you, G, for being here. It's awesome to have you with me. Today, we're going to talk about basically how marketing and sales operations are getting shaped, with engineering, especially in the past 10 years, and maybe also to see a bit of the future, hopefully. So you've been doing a lot of data automation, operation, marketing, and stuff. I want to have a heads up for those who are listening. This is going to be kind of like a high-level conversation. So if you have any questions, absolutely do not hesitate to come back to us. So Jay, you've been working at like Apple, mentioned Segment. I know in so many great companies out there. You've recently founded Hyper Growth Partners. Maybe you could introduce yourself, tell us a bit what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know me, I've been doing marketing stuff for 20 years now. Actually, January of 2023 will be my 20th anniversary of doing marketing stuff online, and things have changed quite a bit. But I think the one thing that has stayed true when it comes to me is I'm at the crossroads of a technology lover. I just love technology for sure, and a marketer. I love human psychology. So I'd say that the crossroads of human psychology and technology is where I live, and that has led me into growth marketing, leveraging technical solutions, tools, engineers to create better user experiences. That's what I do. More recently, I'm obviously an advisor at great companies like Ramp. I'm an investor. I do many things. But first and foremost, I am a lover of technology.
Excellent. So we both agree on this. Maybe you could elaborate on what happened in the past 10 years, because obviously the job you had like 10 years ago, 20 years ago is definitely not the same as today, because you often talk about how, injecting engineering inside marketing, it's the thing to do and stuff like this. But what does it really mean, because stuff has changed so much. So what it's come to that?
Yeah, I think there's technology cycles all the time, and what has changed is that we moved from a, let's say, early 2010 situation where there were early tools for marketers like Marketo, like HubSpot, which appeared like late 2000, early 2010. Or became mainstream around that date, and that enabled people who were not technologists to build fairly complex logic flows and nurture sequences, right? And so that is what emerged about 10 years ago. From there, there's really been, I think, like two paths. One is, let's say, the more like complex high technology approach with people who are building more and more complex logics, technology tools into marketing, and those that have gone into like the creative aspect, right? And so the job functions has slowly separated, and it's continuing today. Right now, you have brand teams, awareness teams who focus and with PMNs, right? And so the job function has separated. Whereas before it was like one team. Before you had like the marketing team, and that included like doing user research, pricing, packaging, the typical 4 P's of marketing, and doing the content, which meant the email content and the web content and the offline content, and looking at the performance of all of that, right? Now it has separated. Those teams still exist, but now you have a team that's closer to revenue, okay? That is, whether you want to call it like demand gen or growth marketing, what doesn't really matter, right? But there's a team that's focused on driving revenue, and they encompass all the performance, all of the paid, all of the outbound, all of the let's say data building, so marketing ops, more ops, and some other things. So there's a high technology KPI driven team that has emerged over the past 10 years, and it's continuing to happen. It's continuing to split.
And would you say that operations teams are kind of like the bridge between those two worlds, if I could say?
Maybe it's starting to happen. It's a very recent thing. If you think of marketing operations is 2 years, 3 years max. You know, it's very recent. Before there was a business operations that did like everything, right? And again, so what we're seeing is like specialization of roles. And the reason why that is because there's increased competition in our markets. There's the desire for a lower CAC. There's desire for higher performance, and that forces companies to react by creating specialized functions that can optimize the entire team sequence performance more than before.
And you actually mentioned revenue operations. This is mostly what it's about, right?
Yeah. No, it's about driving more revenue at lower cost, more predictability is what I would say. I think the challenge that marketing faced and probably failed at answering properly is being able to predict what the outcome is going to be, and be accountable or be measurable. Okay, those are the two things, right? If you think of marketing, it's like, oh, like we have leads and visits. Like that was very true 10 years ago. Like if you look at my first keynotes from like 2015 or 2014, like I'm saying, please throw away vanity metrics, okay? Because most of the teams I was talking to were focused on vanity metrics, and they did not have the tools or the measurement, the tracking in place to measure what happened down funnel. They owned a little like garden of like websites and emails, and that was it. And they didn't look at conversion. No one gets hired as a good marketer these days with that mindset. No one, right? Yeah. No one. Now you need to own pipeline. You need to own like pipeline dollars and conversion and time to close. And like you have like a forecast for the next like 6 to 12 months, and you're accountable for that number. So that's the change. You want to know what's the change over the past 10 years? That's the change. Marketers have become accountable for a pipeline number, and they're building predictable forecasts. That's the change.
The thing is, we're talking marketing here. And for example, I guess that when you mentioned 2015, it's also because of segments, because segment has changed again so much. What do you do when it comes to sales? Because you talked about predictable pipelines, for example, and stuff like this. I know that you've built amazing things with Ramp. It's a bit new. I mean, having the modern stack inside the sales machine and vice versa. How do you do with this? Because it's quite technical. I mean, for the marketing side, it's more or less easy because you have so many tools out there. But for the sales stack, it's a bit complicated, right?
Part of it is tools. Part of it is mindset. The thing is that marketers or some part of the marketing population were forced to adapt. And those who didn't, as you know, it's evolution. Those who don't adapt die, all right? Sales, it hasn't happened yet. There's some of it. For example, you're in sales, you're a sales leader. If you don't use a sales call recording platform like Gong, you've been living under a rock for the past couple of years, right? If you don't use like a dashboard, like a fairly modern like sales performance dashboard, it's kind of the same. Now, the movement is slower than in marketing. That is true. So there's some mindset, but the tools exist. The tools absolutely exist out there, all right? There is less of a need because sales has always been very measurable, right? And the measurement effect, what you were saying about segment is true. I think of Gong. What Gong has brought to sales is the same thing that Segment has brought to marketing. It's measurability of something that was not measurable. In the case of Gong, that's sales calls. Before, we didn't know if sales call happened. We didn't know what happened in the call. Now we do. Before Segment, we had some notion of what happened on the website, but it was like very, very rough, right? If you were using GA before that, it's like really, really rough. Okay. And what's interesting is I lived at a couple of intersections myself of multiple companies that tried to replace the CRM, so the data part of the infrastructure for the entire company, right? So the CRM Segment tried to say, hey, there's the data that the users produce on the website is what matters. That is the key. Nothing else matters. Gong said, well, no, it's the conversations that matter. Only conversations, and we can build the entire CRM. We don't need salespeople to enter data in Salesforce anymore. And Drift, where I was, said, no, actually, we can move all of that towards a web chat, all right? And with a web chat, we will then structure with some NLP all of the data that's happening in that conversation. Yeah. They all have the same mindset, all right? It's replacing how data is entered in a way that it can be measured. That's the movement.
But at the end of the day, a sales rep is going to take a look at its CRM.
For now.
For now, you think it's going to change?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the CRM is a very poor way of doing what sales are supposed to do. It is focusing the effort of the salesperson on data collection and data extraction, which is not where they should focus. They should focus on doing the best call possible. Now, you might say, well, if they should do the best call, they need to have some insights, so they need to do the data extraction. Yes, but the CRM is terrible for that. If you think of the data that can be produced by a tool like a platform like Captain Data on an account, how do you present that properly on a CRM? There's no way. The CRM is just, it's a crude way of doing it. It's very crude, yeah. Right? And so I'm just saying, like, it's the wrong platform for the purpose it's pursuing. And that's what Gong is trying to do, interestingly. And many others, like Drift and Segment also, they're trying to synthesize the data that's available, whatever the source, and produce a summary or a pitch, in the case of Gong, of what the sales rep should say. So we are, in this sense, automating humans through technology. Eventually, we're going to get to a point where maybe midpoint we say, hey, sales rep, these are the 5 key points you need to talk about. This is the package you should push. This is the key aspects of the features of the product that is going to make this customer tick, because we have predicted these are the right aspects, right? But down the line, you don't need the sales rep anymore, right? Because if you're producing the forecast of what should be said to convince someone, then you're just using a human body to blabble, blah, 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 the key points. That is unnecessary.
Okay, that's a very interesting point. If I go a little bit further, maybe taking a deep look at companies like Ramp, because we talk about pipeline forecasts and so on and so on. For example, how do they do at Ramp? If you have any insights on, first, what's the process? Because obviously, we are talking about tools and stuff like this, data, but at the end of the day, it's how you actually build the process rather than anything else. Because building things is cool, but if you don't have a clear process, it's not going to work out. How do you do? What's the first steps you take a look at? Because you mentioned, for example, having a clear idea of your total addressable markets, adding data, having context. But then you mentioned also that the CRM is not the place to do it. Mm-hmm. So how does it combine, with everything you mentioned?
Right now, it's complicated. I'll be transparent. It's a lot of work, right? And right now, a lot of that is homegrown stuff. We can go into the details. But what's interesting is that there's 2 things that are interesting. Why do I push companies I work with to build this? All right. And why does it work? Okay. I push companies to do this because it is a competitive moat. Few companies do it. It adds immense value to the marketing teams to be able to know the entire market, to predict the value of all companies that they could encounter in the market, who they should work, who they should not work on closing, and what are the buying intents of all the companies. So what do they sit in the buying cycle, all right? That's why it works, because it enables marketing and sales team to focus their efforts on a smaller part of the population and deliver a better experience to that smaller part. Your budget, if you want to say, if you imagine you have like $1 million budget to touch, 100,000 businesses, that's $10 per business, right? But if you're able to focus your efforts on 10% of that, on 10,000 businesses who are likely to convert, now you have $100 per business, which enables you to do a lot more ads and emails and sales touches. Okay, so you can focus your efforts better than a company that's going to go widespread. Okay, and that answers the second question, right? Which is the why does it work? Answers why I do it. I do it because no one else does it, because there's no solutions. The lack of solutions means few companies will do it. It means it is a competitive angle. Eventually, companies will build platforms, tools to do this, all right? And it will become widespread. And so the marginal value will go down, which is why my job is always to sit at the forefront of, let's say, the cutting edge of the marketing advancements, progress, to always push the envelope so that we have the better conversion, we have the better performance.
Okay, but if again, like it seems so simple and so complicated at the same time.
It's expensive.
Where do you,
it's hard. It's expensive. But I like picking those kind of projects. That's how you win. You don't win by doing the same things as everyone else. You don't.
Definitely. But so where's the struggle? Like, is it tech? Is it executive alignment, maturity, knowledge? I mean, why so few companies do it? I mean, you mentioned that there are maybe not enough solutions, but then, I mean, I guess a few companies out there could do it. They have the budgets.
Yes. You need to have the budget. You need to have someone like myself, and there are many others, right, who have the conviction and sometimes have the experience, but at least have the conviction that this is the right way. And they need to be able to convince internally, not only leadership, but also other people to work on that project. If we look into like what I've done, most of the time it relies on having engineers working on marketing problems. It's a hard sell. Most engineers won't want to. All right. I've done it many times. So now I know how to convince engineers. I know how to pitch engineers on working on marketing problems. But if you've never done it, it's super hard. Most engineers will tell you, no, I want to work on real problems. I want to work on the product. I don't want to work on marketing. That's not worthy of my efforts.
And so maybe one of the things that you could mention, I guess, is that, yeah, but if you want the product to be working, then you need to be working with marketing, right?
My angle is almost that, with a spin. I generally hire former founders, technical engineering founders who failed once or twice, and ask them, did you fail because your code was bad? And like, of course not. Did you fail because your product was bad? Of course not. Did you fail because you found no customers? Like, yeah, like we couldn't find customers, grow fast enough. I'm like, I can teach you how to find customers. You do code for me, I'll teach you how to find customers. We got a deal.
So are we talking about, in a way, industrializing go-to-markets in a technical way, in some sense?
Yes. We are talking of creating a competitive advantage through technological strategies, which is a combination of tools and engineers? The answer is that no tool, as of today, does it without any technical knowledge. No tool. Like, there are great tools all over the place. There are tools to do some great scraping. There are tools to do some good data storage. There's like lots of tools. If you don't know how to pass data from one to the other and manipulate the data in some shape or form, you're not getting anywhere. All right, especially at scale. You can, I mean, if you're like, some people are like, oh yes, I'll export the data. Like that doesn't work. Like, if you want to connect the platforms together to create that kind of experience, you need some kind of a strong technological resource. And that is generally an engineer. It could be like a data ops person. Like, there's different ways to describe it, but somebody's connecting the tools, the platforms together.
So, for example, when you see ZoomInfo's messaging stating that this is the go-to-market engine and stuff like this, you don't really believe it?
I think it's a great start. It gives people it's an appetizer, all right? But it's not that I don't believe it. If it's available to everyone, I'm not interested. It's not interesting to me, because I don't want to have the same tools as everyone else. That's not how I win. Look at all the companies I picked. Every single company I picked was in a highly competitive environment. Drift against Intercom. I did Gorgias against Zendesk. I'm doing Ramp against Brex. Okay? And so in every one of those scenarios, I cannot afford using the same tools. It's too much of a risk.
So what are we talking about? Are we talking about using multiple source, multiple data providers, pipelines, a strong process that is looking deeply at how everything is interconnected, standardizing things? This is what we're talking about, right?
Yes. If you think of going back to the ZoomInfo example, ZoomInfo it's a good start, but it is not, the data is not personalized, customized to your industry, your product, your ACV, your customers. Like, it's a good start. It gives you some good baseline information, but it is very generic. It's very generic, okay? And exactly like your customers are a multitude of variations, right? You need to adjust for that. And so if you look in the case of Ramp, we don't have like one intent signal or two. We've got above 20 intent signals that we gather from all around, all right? We don't have one or two data vendors. We have, I think, 6 or 7, okay? And so, yeah, I mean, that gives us that competitive edge. I know I keep going back to it. That is my true conviction. Like, that's how I win.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with you. But then again, we're all at the first question, you know, like, how do you build it? And it's a bit early, maybe, because...
But you start with going from the most obvious to the and easiest to the hardest. So if ZoomInfo is how you get that first win, that's great. Maybe ZoomInfo is how you start. And I think that's okay. Okay. And prove success there. I usually use something like a Clearbit reveal to do a reveal loop, or I do some kind of retargeting campaign to the people who drop off in my signup, right? If you think of like what my mindset is when I come to a new business, I tend to go bottom up. Okay, I start towards the bottom of the funnel, so like towards like the activation or like sign up phase. I look at the people who drop off, and I'm looking at what's the drop off rate. If the drop off is high and the people who are dropping off are qualified, there's enough volume. Start there. You already have the right. Because those people they already signed up. They just haven't completed the activation phase, right? You absolutely have the right to like nurture them. No worries. You can go slightly, you notch up every time until you reach to the TAM, which is people who are not even aware of your company, but are expressing buying intent on G2 or things like that. All right. Yeah. And maybe you start with the easy thing, which is emails. all right? And you do like retarget with emails people in your sign up drop-off sequence, right? And then you say, oh, that's cool. Maybe we can add some ads there. So you're gonna like manipulate that audience and send it through like a census or a high touch towards a Facebook. And you start having like this lasagna approach, which is there's like multiple layers, all right, of like one event and one output. All right, and you just stack them like, ooh, this like nurtures like event and like nurture sequence, event and ads. Oh, let's move one step up. So you have like this like multiple layers of strategies. Very much like a lasagna.
It also depends on the resources you have, the expertise, and so on, I guess. And it's also why we always say that you cannot really do outbound without inbound and vice versa, because obviously, if you do both, it's a great mix.
There's something I want to say before I forget. I tend to build fairly complex, high volume, high performance strategies. Those are meant for post PMF businesses, post product market fit. Okay, in a generally, as I said, competitive environment. Do not use this pre PMF or in a education market. If you have to educate people about what the problem is, and they don't know who you are, and they don't know they have the problem, this is going to fail dramatically, all right? No amount of like outbound email is going to convince, some random person that they should buy your software that they don't even know they have the problem. You need then to go into education marketing, which is completely different, okay? So just to keep that in mind, you need to have product market fit. You need to have like some amount of awareness, and you need to like ideally be in a competitive environment where people can say, oh, this is a better X, right? This is a better X for the problem I have. So for example, Gorgias, like it's a better Zendesk when you're a merchant. Yeah. It is, it absolutely is. And so people are like, oh, I get it. Like I tried Zendesk, it didn't work for me because I'm an e-commerce merchant, but this integrates with Shopify, this is great. I want this. So yeah, that's the
you actually answered the question I was going to ask. It was definitely around which type of companies should follow these principles, because I totally agree with you. If you do not know what you're doing, especially if you're pre-PMF, then it's a mess. I mean, pre-PMF, you have to test a lot of things. You have to move fast. You have to iterate and stuff. You cannot say, okay, I'm going to build the engine. Yeah. And so on.
It's not worth it. Definitely. You'll be going to be wasting efforts. It's just like, it's if I'm taking a shovel in my garden and mining in case I find diamond. Like this doesn't work.
At least you'd be very lucky. Yeah.
But that is not a strategy. My strategy has always been looking at probabilities. It's always what I do.
Maybe as a last word, we've talked about process tools and stuff like this. What are we talking in maybe 2025? Like, what's the market? What's it going to look like? More operations people, more data people. I mean, what's the game,
Less people seems like what's going on right now. That's definitely what's going on. If you think from a macro perspective, it's less people. But that's also been the trend before, the weird times we're in right now. Technology and platforms enable us to do more with less. Okay, so more campaigns, more customers, more pipeline. What's the less? Less people. That's where the cost is coming from, right? Like, you got to be transparent here. Like, the stuff we're doing is basically putting SDRs out of a job. Now, that's not a big problem because no one builds a career in SDR. It's like a temporary thing that you move before doing other things. I'm just saying, like, the low value, let's say, job, post-college grad, people who know very little of like going on LinkedIn and like reaching out randomly to people who feel like a good fit. That's going away. Yeah. That's for sure. Okay. And that's been a trend. But there's 600,000 SDRs in the US. Okay. It's a massive it's a massive, let's say, job market there, right? So more automation, less people, less cost, more technology, more data. And so marketers will be more and more, I think, technologists managing automation, pipelines, and data stacks.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. So it's the rise of operators. Yeah.
The creativity component is going down, especially when you look at what's going down on all of the generative AI, whether you look at GPT-3 or some of the new thing with like DALL-E or other stuff. Like if you have a kid and the kid is dream is to do like ad banners, right? Not that I think it's true, but just imagine somebody who wants to do ad banners as a career. Like next year or 2 years from now, that's gone. Like no one's going to be creating ad banners. That's going to be auto-generated through a DALL-E-like system based on inputs and prompts, and boom, you have an ad banner, right? So the entire creative component is going away. What's left? Data pipelines.
And processes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Thank you so much, G, for having this conversation with me. I think it was very clear. I hope we'll see it coming through, like in 2025. We'll see. Definitely.
Another podcast then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark the date for 2025, okay?
Excellent.
Awesome.
We'll contact
Thanks,
you, man.
Guillaume.
Thanks. Have a nice one.
Yeah.